When watching the sport of MMA, we only really see the success of promotions which manage to survive and then build a global brand. Many promotions get stuck at the local level or take investors' money and go too big too quickly. This often leads to disaster, as the original teething problems are never sorted out and the entire event ends up looking very unprofessional. Unforeseen circumstances often lead to inflated costs, and crowds aren't always as big as they're expected to be. MMA certainly isn't an area of business where you can bundle fights together on a card and start printing money. There is a lot of time, effort, and organisation that goes into making a promotion work. As seen with the global state of the sport, there are really not too many stable promotions left compared to the ones which have closed down or gone bankrupt. As of today, there are really not too many promotions in the West which are both functional and profitable. These are companies such as the UFC, Bellator, Cage Warriors, KSW, and a handful of North American promotions. Granted that Russia and Asia have their own successful promotions too, but these rarely make it out of their home countries and are stuck in a specific geographical region. It costs a huge amount of money and risk to create a global fighting promotion that most investors would simply rather try another business instead. Many of the promotions listed today were destined to fail. They did not handle events professionally, some refused to pay fighters, and in general it was only a matter of time before they lost everything. The worst mixed martial arts promotions of all time. Fame MMA UK. If you didn't know about Polish MMA, then it's somewhat difficult to explain Fame MMA. Essentially, MMA is so popular in Poland that a promotion has been created that sees various celebrities fight one another under standard MMA rules. Surprisingly, this is extremely successful in Poland and has had over 10 events. However, the creators of Fame MMA attempted to make a show in the UK named Fame MMA UK, which featured various Z-list celebrities fighting one another, with a few Polish celebrities sprinkled on the undercard. In summary, no information could be found online about the build-up of the event, and the PPV cost increased from £5 to £12.99 during the final week of the fight. The event began late, had a crowd of only 5,000 people, and empty seats were attempted to be hidden by a curtain. But of course, as you would expect, everyone noticed this. Fighters were terrible, as you would expect. These were celebrities that are famous for being on TV and had little to no professional training. In addition to this, despite being a British event, commentary was only available in Polish. If things couldn't get any worse for Fame MMA UK, many of the fighters were left unpaid, which left a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Golden Boy MMA. Watch any interview with Chuck Liddell from the past 8 to 10 years, and you'll be able to see that the damage he took during his career is certainly catching up with him. Words are slurred, and it is a lot more difficult for him to form sentences. However, these facts did not seem to bother Oscar De La Hoya, who immediately signed Liddell to face Tito Ortiz in his debut of Golden Boy MMA Promotions, which would see him fight for the first time in 8 years and receive more brain injuries from yet another knockout. Battlefield FC, an Asian promotion which looked quite high budget on the surface. Battlefield FC had a very nice set layout and a production which would rival that of the UFC. However, this is where the similarities with the UFC end, since Battlefield didn't pay any of their fighters for 1 year after the event until they decided it was time to try another, this time in Macau. The second event was an absolute disaster, with fighters not getting paid yet again, referees going on strike since they weren't paid from the first event some 2.5 years earlier. As a result, the main event was botched by an early stoppage from an inexperienced referee, and the promotion folded. Strikebox. Founded by the rather strange Stefan Patry, Strikebox was an absolute mess. The entire premise of the promotion was clearly created by someone who has no idea what MMA is. Essentially, the rules of strike box was MMA but with no ground fighting, so pretty much kickboxing. However, you were allowed to take your opponent to the floor, but strangely you must allow them to get back up. As the promotion took place in Canada, these rules were not allowed by Quebec, who forced them to either follow boxing or MMA rules, not something in between. As a result of this, being the geniuses they were, Strikebox decided they would get all fighters to perform a gentleman's agreement backstage and shake hands, promising they wouldn't fight each other on the ground beforehand. Of course, this didn't go to plan, and the main event ended with a takedown and ground and pound, followed by the crowd throwing beer and chairs into the cage. Pentagon Combat. Named Pentagon Combat, the cage at this show had 13 sides, so it's not really clear why this name was deemed appropriate. This alone should be a hint at what is coming next. A fairly high budget promotion for 1997, Pentagon paid the likes of Oleg Taktarov and Renzo Gracie to compete at their event, which certainly would not have been cheap at this time. Taking place in Brazil, the main event was billed as a bitter rivalry between BJJ and Luta Livre, which it certainly was. During the event, spectators started climbing up against the cage to jeer at opposition fighters. Renzo Gracie had enough of this and decided to punch a fan in the face, which in turn caused a riot and the event had to be abandoned. The aftermath of this also caused MMA to be banned in Rio de Janeiro for almost 10 years. International Fight League. Astonishingly, the International Fight League had everything it needed to be successful. A publicly traded company, IFL was not a promotion which was funded on a shoestring budget and had top-level talent such as Roy Nelson and coaches such as Ken Shamrock. In addition to this, IFL had a TV deal with Fox Sports and fighters were given salaries and medical benefits. If you were to look at the IFL as an outside investor, you would think it was an extremely professional and well-run organisation. This wouldn't be an incorrect assumption, but it was the overall strategy of the company that ultimately led to its downfall. Unlike other MMA promotions, the IFL tried to become the next NBA or NFL by dividing fighters into teams with cheesy colour-coded uniforms and logos. This, coupled with pre-taped recordings, made sure that the IFL would never catch on with pure MMA fans and was doomed to be a failure. Yammer. Unfortunately, a great concept which did not take off. The idea behind Yammer was that too many fights ended up slowing down against the cage, where fighters could clinch and stop strikes whilst using the cage to ensure that they didn't get taken down to the ground. The fact that Yammer cages had a raised lip ensured you couldn't really get stuck against the cage for long periods of time and were usually fighting in an open space. Unfortunately, several high-profile fighters dropped out just before the event happened and the card was certainly not exciting. Had there been some highlight reel knockouts or crazy submissions, this is an idea that could well have taken off and become a legitimately good promotion. Ultimate Athlete. Ultimate Athlete was really not a bad promotion to begin with. It had solid fighters such as Nick Diaz and was able to put on an event which was both on time and well produced to a reasonably high degree of quality. Things came to a head in an unfortunate sequence of events that took place at only its second event. A Russian fighter suffered a low blow from an American fighter who happened to be in a Mongol biker gang. As the gang were in attendance, they were not too happy and started throwing beer bottles into the cage, which escalated into a full-scale brawl within the crowd. This ended up with a member of the audience being stabbed in the chest. Needless to say, Ultimate Athlete was never able to put on another promotion after this event.